eyes will see when your face is before me. I can only imagine. Yeah. Surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus? Or in all of you be still? Will I stand in your presence? To my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak at all? I can only imagine. I can only imagine. I can only imagine when that day comes and I find myself standing in the sun. I can only imagine when all I will do is forever, forever worship you. I can only imagine. I can only imagine. Surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus? Or in all of you be still? Will I stand in your presence? Or to my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak at all? I can only imagine. I can only imagine. Surrounded by your glory, what will my heart feel? Will I dance for you, Jesus? Or in all of you be still? Will I stand in your presence? Or to my knees will I fall? Will I sing hallelujah? Will I be able to speak at all? I can only imagine. 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 I can only imagine when all I will do is forever, forever worship you. I can only imagine.
Yeah, you take it. Thank you.
Emily, thank you very much. That was very good. Ed Ackerson. No, this is you. I won't tell you that the preacher really pointed out that you weren't here last week whenever I handed this out. This is your ordination certificate. God bless you, buddy.
I love you, brother. Did you hear from Miss McCall? She's free of cancer.
She is. Ed was just telling me that they're saying that Paul is probably going to be free of cancer, or is free of cancer. Now, that's a big report since last week. Yeah, that's the power of prayer. That's a wonderful report. Thank you. All right, junior high, senior high, you're with me. Don't get up. So today we're going to continue on with difficult Bible characters. Difficult Bible characters. Don, am I on? You didn't hear me? Okay, very good. Well, I got one for all of you, and I got one for Don as well, right there. It's got a blue light. Wanted to make sure I was wired for sound. Ishmael. Well, today, if you follow any of history, you'll know that Ishmael went the wrong direction, and that's why we have division, is because of something that took place thousands of years ago. But I'm one of those people that I've looked at this, and life isn't always fair. Has anyone else ever noticed that? Life is not always fair. So today, I'm going to give you a sermon on Ishmael that you'll probably never heard before, probably never hear again. So just all 45,000 of you, thank you for being here. So life is not always fair. Sometimes it just seems like we've been shortchanged. I'm sure some of you feel that way as well. Got the short end of things, dealt a bad hand, overlooked. It just happens. Treated unfairly. You know, it was Abraham Lincoln in the Gettysburg Address that said that all men are created equal. He didn't get that out of Scripture, all right? So that was Lincoln's idea, and it was a good plan and a good thought. But folks, not all people are created equal, and we know that. We see that life is not always fair. Sometimes it's just unfair. Family circumstances that we are born into can create all sorts of issues. You ever heard this? Well, they were born with a silver spoon. Anyone ever heard that? How many has that been said about you? Okay, Don, outside of you.
He got the rest of us did.
I see. That's what every one of the Barnetts said. That was Don, not the rest of us. Or born into privilege. Every once in a while we hear that on the news, is that they were born into privilege. Of course, there's a house that's 10 times the size of our church, born into privilege. Born on the right side of town. Back where I come from, that's kind of the one that was used. They were born on the right side of town. Whenever Elvis did the song In the Ghetto, it was said that it would ruin his career, but he sang about it, born in the ghetto. In the ghetto. Born on the wrong side of the tracks. Wrong side of the tracks. Born into poverty. And then for others, some, opportunity abounds, and for others, it seems that opportunity seldom comes their way. But now there's a third group. Those are the two groups that are easily identified. Those that seem to have everything come their way, and those who seem to miss everything coming their way. There's those two groups. But there's a third group that I've identified as well, and that's where I've put Ishmael. Those who see their fortune and their opportunities change. Some change for the good. Sometimes we've seen someone who has just really made something of their life, that they have worked hard, they've been able to develop, and they've moved on. Been able to move on from the circumstances of their family or the past that they've had. But there's been others whenever their circumstances have changed and they've gone the wrong direction. I like my kids on the screen, don't you? So I know every one of those kids. So we all know someone like them. I like the one with the lion. If you can't see that, he's holding up a mouse. Life's not fair. Goodbye, mouse. So you get the idea there of what I was trying to accomplish. Well, today our difficult Bible character is Ishmael. Now we all know the story and we understand the division. We understand that there's young Isaac that's going to come onto the scene, but Ishmael's already on the scene. I'm going to address that. We know that Abram and Sarai had a plan that was different than God's. We know that that would take place. We're going to address that. But what about for Ishmael? You know, I can see the problems that have been created throughout history, just like you can because of his birth. But still, Ishmael's just a kid. And life seems pretty unfair to this kid. His life was destined for difficulties from the very beginning. The family and the circumstances for which he was born into were already designed that were going to create issues. Ishmael was born into a situation that was a recipe for disaster. Let's address a little bit of that. Over in chapter 16. Chapter 16. And let's start verses 1 through 4. Now Sarai and Abram, Sarai had borne Abram no children. But she had an Egyptian maidservant named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my maidservant. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Abram agreed to what Sarah said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian maidservant Hagar and gave her to her husband. Now, here's the part that we often don't hear: to be his wife. To be his wife. Not just, here's my servant, go sleep with her and have a baby, but to be his wife. Now, that stuff of multiple wives was much more accepted back then than it is today, by the way. So I'm not going to try to give explanation of all of that. So men, I do not recommend that under any circumstances. Otherwise, you will be sitting in my office. Ever been called to the office? Come down my hallway. It's like going to the principal's office. Okay, now let's go over to verse 15 and 16. I think I just put 15 on the screen, but let's go to 15 and 16. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son she had born. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. Now, let's go over to Genesis chapter 21. In chapter 21, there we're going to find in verses 1 through 5. Let's just go to 5. Abram was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. So we'll just drop down to it. All right, now I want you to consider poor old Ishmael here. First of all, he's been given a very difficult name that he has to live with. But here we got Ishmael. And Ishmael, his dad is 86 years old. Now, that was even old to be a dad in that day, all right? Today, you're a great-granddad at 86 years old. But he's 86 years old. Now, his dad, Abraham, or Abram at the time, Abraham is wealthy. He's got servants. He's got people that tend to all of his business. He's wealthy. Now, he's a father for the first time. He's spending a lot of time with Ishmael. We have to accept that and realize that that would be the case. For all of you guys, whenever you were dads, remember how excited you were to get that very first one? Man, when Michelle come along, I lined up little long dresses for that girl like there was no tomorrow. Some of you that have been here for 40 years remember that. And she would run around this church with dresses that went all the way to the floor, and then I would buy those real ruffly ones. She was my little princess. And I just spent a lot of time with her. I would go to something with the church, and I'd take her with me. And it was even so of Mikey. But the first one was a little different. You know, there was just something about that first one. And the excitement that she brought into my life. She's still bringing excitement into my life. So, it's a new type of excitement, but that's another sermon another day. So, Michelle, if you ever listen to this, now you know. I'm going to talk about that someday. But anyway, when she was about this big, it was a lot of excitement, and all the way through high school, and then I don't know what happened. I turned her over to her mother, and you see what happened. No, so, but anyway, there was a lot of excitement. So for those first 14 years, Abraham and Ishmael, I believe, buddy, they're inseparable. Hey, they're off playing ball, playing catch, chasing hot rods. They're just doing the things that fathers and sons do. Now, their hot rods didn't have motors, they had horses, but anyway, they're off chasing horsepower. However it might be. It was pretty special. I'm pretty sure they were rooting for the Cubs. I believe that they were a good father-son team. And all was going pretty well. Dad and son were developing. So they had a lot of time together, and they developed a very special relationship. Now, Sarah has seen how much Abraham loves this firstborn child. But now, at 14 years later, God fulfills his promise. Now, what has happened is Abraham and Sarah have run ahead of God. I don't know if you've ever done that in your life. There's a few times that I've had to wait for God to catch up with my life. And I want you to know, those weren't my better days. And they're probably not yours either. Sometimes we wait for God to catch up because we're running way ahead of him. Now that's what Abraham and Sarah have done. But now Isaac comes along. Let's go back to chapter 21. Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah. I do notice that between Ishmael and Isaac, God changed their names. Now I don't know that that was necessarily pointed, but God changed their names. There's a reason for that. We know that. As he had said he would, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as God commanded him. And Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born. Okay, now here's what's taking place. There's this new baby at the place. Well, when those new babies come, they can be challenging. Mikey didn't have to speak for 2 years. He'd point, Michelle would jump, and she'd just take care of it. New babies can be challenging. Sometimes they can be challenging from the standpoint that they get all the attention and the other one kind of goes off. Sometimes they just are challenging. My boy Mikey was challenging. Sometimes they're just challenging. They can just be that way. Well, here we got a new baby on the scene. So Sarah is very protective of this new baby. Now she's aware of the relationship that Abraham with with Ishmael. And she wants that for her son as well. So she wants to assure that his wealth and his time and his attention will all go to Isaac. So over verses 8 through 10 now in 21, the child was weaned, that being Isaac. And on the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a great feast. But Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham was milking their kids. Do you ever milk another kid? Some of your heads are nodding. Who wants to go first? Tell us. No. Okay, so no one wants to go first. Sometimes you just dish it out when you shouldn't, all right? And I can almost imagine Ishmael over there dishing it out to little brother, milking him. All right? Yeah, mama's boy, that type of thing. Yeah, it just happens. All right? So, anyway, he's milking him. And she said, now, Sarah said to Abraham, get rid of the slave woman. Do you notice all of a sudden she's the slave woman again and not that other wife of yours? Did anyone else see that change besides me? As I read that, I thought, wait a second. A while ago she was your wife, and now she's that slave woman. Get rid of that slave woman and her son. Now, what about that son? Well, that's the son that Sarah was going to build her own family with. Remember that? And get rid of that kid. For the slave woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. Now, I told you before, there's always this division. The oldest son gets the inheritance. Well, now we got to get rid of this kid. Get him gone. He's got to go away. So that's what is taking place. That is what is starting to happen here. The slave woman and her son, they've got to go. Ishmael has seen his life quickly change. It's gone from one day playing catch with Dad to the next day Dad sending him out of camp. Ishmael is faced with, I believe, disappointment, uncertainty, fear, and hurt. His fortunes have changed. Life is not fair, folks. And anyone who believes that life is equal across the board to everyone, that's not true. That's not reality. If it was, we would all be the same height, we'd all look alike, we'd all run alike, we'd all sound alike. Life isn't fair. I can't sing a note. There's some people that can really sing here. I was left out. I got shortchanged. I got the short end of that deal. Life isn't always fair. Sometimes, now I'm roughly 6'2". I can remember some time back we were out at a shoe store and in walked the Xavier basketball team. I'd never felt like a short person in my life. I had short man syndrome. I said, Deb, we got to leave here. They had guards that were 6'6". I played center. I'm 6'2". Their guards are bigger than me. It wasn't fair. I was looking at a size 13. They were looking at size 17s. Life wasn't fair. Can you imagine? My grandpa Sweeney used to say, son, if you hadn't been turned down for foot, you'd been a tall man. That's kind of the way I felt about those young men. They could have been great big kids. Life isn't always fair. It just doesn't always work that way. Well, that's where Ishmael's at. Many people in life are faced with things that don't seem fair. There's people that are really smart that have trouble getting money for education. That doesn't always seem fair to me. Sometimes the ones who really have the ability can't get it. Sometimes there's that broken home. I think about Cinderella, just to keep it generalized. What about that home where one of the parents have died, or where there's a divorce that has gone on? That's not fair. That's not fair that a child has to grow up without a mom or a dad, but it happens every day. Every day. It's there. It's not fair whenever there's no family support, whenever there's not someone that's there patting them on the back and saying, good job, let's move forward, or we'll get through this. It's not fair whenever children are being raised by grandparents, and for all you grandparents that stepped up, God bless you. I'm thankful for you. But it's not fair that, number one, for you that you had to do it, or number two, that your kids aren't doing it. Because little tykes need younger people. That's just life. That's not fair. It's not fair that David's got a full head of hair and I have very little. But it's life. That's the way it works. That's where Ishmael was. He was disappointed. Life hadn't dealt him a fair hand here. And it was no fault of his own. He didn't choose to be born into this home. God put him there. You didn't choose to be born into the home that you were born into. That's where God put you. For whatever reason, that's where He wanted you. And He was going to give you, now everyone pay attention here. He was going to give you life experiences growing up in that home that you will be able to take and use throughout your life. Now, what you do with them is up to you. You can sit back and say, I wasn't dealt a fair hand. Well, we were one of those families that come from the wrong side of the tracks. In fact, we were so far south of the tracks, the wrong side of the tracks was still in town. We were 15 miles south of town. So you figure it out, we were way down there. Sometimes you just take what you're dealt, and then now it's up to you to do something with it. Ishmael is going to be one of those people that will have to do something with it. So where do we turn whenever that takes place? Okay, things aren't like you would want them to be. They're not what you had hoped for. There's no big mansion that you're going home to today. Things certainly aren't ideal. Maybe it's a broken home that you're going to go home to. Maybe it's fussing and fighting or whatever it is. We have to say now, what now? What now is, folks, we learn to trust God. Genesis chapter 21 again. Let's drop over to verse 15. Verse 15, it say this. Well, let's go to 14. Early the next morning, Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave to Hagar. This man's wealthy, folks. He's God's servant. So I'm going to take a little bag of food and a bag of water and send my kid on his way. He set them on her shoulder, being Hagar, and then sent them off with the boy, sent her off with the boy. She went on her way and wandered to the desert of Beersheba, where the water in the skin was gone. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went off and sat down nearby, about a bow shot away. For she thought, I cannot watch the boy die. And as she sat there nearby, she began to sob. First of all, shame on Hagar. Let me point that out. I can't do anything about my situation, so I'm not going to try. So I'm going to wander off and let my boy die, not even sitting close to him. Because that's what she was preparing for, was to watch her son die at a distance. But she heard the boy crying. God heard the boy crying. And the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what is the matter, Hagar? In other words, parent, wake up! Wake up, Mom! Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift up the boy and take him by the hand, for I will make him a great nation. A great nation. Verse 19. Then God opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. She went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God, here's verse 20. This is where I want you to see. God was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the desert, become an archer. While he was living in the desert, his mother got him a wife from Egypt. The boy is setting out about life. So where do we turn, folks? When life is unfair, God is still there. When life is unfair, God is still there. Life deals unfair blows to people every day. There's war throughout our world. We see refugees fleeing from one country because of the danger. We see them looking for food and water. Doesn't seem very fair. As a nation, we've sent tons and tons and tons of food to deprived areas, to watch some warlord set upon it and starve his own people. Life is not fair, no matter how fair we want to make it. There's poverty not only worldwide, but throughout our nation and throughout our own city. There's poverty all about us, and life is not fair. There's premature death. There's disasters that take everything that people own. There's floods, there's tornadoes, natural disasters that steal from people. So, all of that being said, Hagar, the mother, decides to quit and just watch her son die. But God opened her eyes to opportunity. Today, you may be here and be a single parent. You may be here and be jobless. You may be here and having a difficult time. Maybe your marriage is in trouble. Maybe your life is in trouble. But God is still there, folks. He's not far from us. And I'd like to tell you that He's going to fix everything, but probably what He's going to tell you is, open your eyes. I'm not far from you. Now, just because you start believing in God, and just because you start trusting God, doesn't mean you're going to go home and find a steak on your table. But it means that you're going to go home and you're not going to go home alone. That He's going to be there walking through a tough valley with you. It may be a time in your life whenever you want to throw up your hands and say, I'm done. That's where Hagar and Ishmael had to be. Their fortune has changed drastically. Now, Hagar had difficulties with Sarah. We know that. Ishmael had dad all to himself for 14 years. This kid's got a tough time. But the scripture said God was with him. And I believe today that no matter what we are going through, God is still there. Not everyone's going to have the same advantage in life, but everyone will have God if they so desire. God was with the boy. Everyone will have God if they so desire. Folks, God is not going to be a cure-all for your problems. But He's going to tell you to open your eyes. Sometimes opportunities don't look like opportunities. Now I want you to consider once again Hagar. She has left wealth. They lived well in Abraham's camp. Ishmael lived really well. They've lived well. But they've left that. Now they're sitting in the desert. The boy is way over there under a bush, and the parent's sitting over here. And I've thrown up my hands in despair, and he's over there crying. But I'm out of water. And God opened her eyes to water. Now that water doesn't seem like very much, does it? But all of a sudden that was the most valuable thing there was. It sustained his life. Sometimes the littlest things can become the greatest. And if today I can get you to trust a little bit more in God, I'd like to tell you that it's going to fix your life. I'm going to tell you that it will give you tools to make it. It doesn't mean that your marriage will be salvaged. It means that your marriage has hope. It doesn't mean that your life will become easy. It means that your life will be bearable. God will walk with you. We only have one guarantee in life, folks, and that's God. There's no guarantee of what's going to happen tomorrow. There's no guarantee that any of us will even be here tomorrow. But through Jesus, God did provide a promise to believers. In Matthew chapter 28, verse 20, it just simply says, "And surely I will be with you always to the very end of the age." He didn't say I'm going to fix everything, but I will be with you. You don't have to walk alone. Ishmael went on, and you can read the rest. He became a father of nations. That nation has caused trouble after trouble after trouble. But he became a father of nations. God didn't abandon the child. He has heirs. He became pretty well to do. He was there to help bury his father. God was with the boy. And in your hard time, whenever it seems like life is unfair, there's just times that I'm going to tell you, it just seems like it's really unfair. It happens to all of us. There's times that I think, well, that's not fair. And Deb's had to live with me 46 years. She's had to think it once or twice. So that's not fair. I think it's pretty fair. You ought to have seen the guy she's, never mind. But God is always there. Walk with Him. Face today with Him. Don't wait for fairness. It may not come. Walk with the Lord today. Will you all please stand as we have our invitation?